Here we are in Annotated Urinary System Lecture number 4. We've looked up close at the nephron and what happened in the glomerulus. So we're going to continue now by taking a detailed look at what goes on in the tubes. And let's see what's happening there, because there's a lot happening. So the PCT, the proximal convoluted tubule, remember virtually all of your glucose and amino acids, roughly 65% of all reabsorption takes place here. So just go back again, what happened in the glomerulus? We filtered almost everything out of the blood. We didn't filter out proteins, and we didn't filter out red blood cells and other white blood cells and platelets as well. We filtered out everything else, including all the good stuff and all the bad stuff. We got to get the bad stuff back in. So here we have pumps and transporters that are going to be pumping and transporting glucose and amino acid from the filtrate that's flowing through the tubule and pull it back and pump it back into the blood. Lots of mitochondria here for active transfer. You need a lot of ATP. So kidney burns energy here. A lot of mitochondria, a lot of ATP. Passive transport driven by concentration gradients. So remember, we've got these fantastic gradients for sodium and for chloride and for potassium, and we can use those to move things one way or the other. Reabsorbs greater variety of chemicals than any other part of the nephron. 65%, roughly 2/3, whatever, of all the stuff that got filtered out gets pulled back in here, okay? Some of it comes in between cells, some of it goes actually through the cells, not a big deal. Just there are lots of pumps and transporters. Now, the transport maximum, this is a big deal, and I want you to know about this because this explains some very basic physiology here that you probably knew about but didn't know why it happened, and now we're going to find out why. So, when the transport proteins of cell membranes are completely saturated. So let's go back. Remember those SGLTs, those sodium glucose transporters? Let's say that in a certain part of the tubule here, you've got 10 transporters. I mean, that's a ridiculous number. I'm just making up a tiny ridiculous number, but just go with me. Let's say you've got 10 SGLTs. Let's say there are 15 molecules of glucose coming through. Can it handle all of them? No. If there were 10 SGLTs and 7 molecules of glucose coming down the pipe, well, sure, we got spares. But when 15 come through, you only got 10 transporters. You don't get all of it. And so where does it end up? In the filtrate, in the urine, and that's why people who cannot reabsorb enough glucose end up with glucose in their urine. The same is true for any other protein as well, or any other solute really. But here I'm talking specifically about glucose. So blood glucose, if your blood glucose level goes above 220 milligrams per deciliter, some of it is going to remain in the urine. And what's that? That's glycosuria. That's the old country doctor, where you could test to see if somebody's diabetic. Stick your finger in the urine, take a little taste. Sweet meant you may have a diabetic on your hands. But here's the big deal with the controlling blood sugar. Can you see why it's so important for diabetics to control blood sugar? If your blood sugar is above 220, then your kidney can't get it all back in, ends up in your urine, and ends up staying in your blood as well, and that's big trouble. That's trouble for diabetics. So the transport maximum is the principle here. That works for drugs and other things as well. You can only get so much of it back in. The rest of it's going to end up in the urine. So looking here, nice diagrams here. Oh God, and it's multicolored. Oh jeez, this just feels like it's wow, kindergarten all over again. It's just wonderful. I love little colored blocks and pegs. And look at the triangles going, the triangle ovals, and the circles go. All right, glucose reabsorbed by the SGLTs, sodium glucose transporters. So as you'll see, when you look up there in the diagram at the very top on the right-hand side, you'll see an Na plus and a glucose, amino acids, lactate, chloride. Yeah, pumps. Pumping it back in. Look at chloride anion pump. Is that awesome? See, look in the key down the lower left, symporters, antiporters. All right. Some ions and urea are absorbed here as well. All right. We do maintain some urea in our blood. It's a solute, helps maintain osmotic pressure. PCT plays an incredibly important role in pH balance of the blood and urine because when you move a lot of solutes, you're also going to end up changing pHs, okay? You can move things like hydrogens and bicarbs. Yeah, you're going to change pH. So the kidney is really what is the most powerful regulator of your body's acid-base balance. Remember, we just finished talking about how the respiratory system control that. Respiratory system is fast, but not very powerful. Kidney slower, but much more powerful. And here's where it's happening, right here, all right? PCT damage is a common cause of renal failure. So, for example, people with chronic hypertension, it's really rough on the whole kidney. And so you end up damaging the PCT, and then you start losing the ability of nephrons to do their job. Azotemia will follow. That's not coronavirus, that's just something else. Waste removal. So we're going to secrete, okay, urea, uric acid, creatinine, ammonia, some drugs. We filter it out, but then also we can secrete it here in the PCT, controlling the balance, okay? Renal clearance is the main reason many drugs have to be taken several times a day. So what happens when you take a drug? Ibuprofen, your thyroid hormone, whatever, any illegal drug, whatever it is. Think about it. It's going to go through your liver. Your liver's going to metabolize it, turn it into a metabolite that is then dumped back into the blood. With many drugs, it's not actually the drug that has the effect, it's the metabolite. But at any rate, these metabolites need to circulate around in your blood. That's how the drug has its effect on whatever, pain, you name it, whatever, blood pressure. The drug has to stay in your blood and keep going places in your body. Well, think about what the kidney's doing. Did it have a special list that said that this goes back into the blood? No, it had that for glucose, had it for amino acids, had it for some vitamins, so on. No, so the drugs just get left in the refuse pile. They get dumped into the urine. That's why. And it's like in this case, it's like, damn, kidney, stop doing that. I'm trying to take this drug and you're pulling all the drug out of my body. Well, that's the way the kidney normally works to protect you. It's taking toxins out, and it doesn't know the difference between a drug and a toxin. And in fact, there isn't a whole lot of difference, frankly. Kidney acid-base balance. Kidney is going to be controlling the movement of both bicarb and hydrogens. And when it does that, you can control pH. So look on the left-hand side. See, moving bicarbonate, moving hydrogens. Yeah, and then further down, you can see on the tubule. So we're focusing on the PCT right now, so we'll stay on the PCT side. So notice all the things that are secreted and reabsorbed. Reabsorbed, again, means they're going from the filtrate back into the blood. Secreted means they're going from the blood into the filtrate, okay? Kidney doing active control here of osmotic pressure and acid-base balance. Secretion of hydrogen and bicarbonate regulates ions, regulates pH of body fluids. Water conservation. So again, remember the thin segment of the loop, a lot of water moves there. So the kidney is controlling your body's water balance under directions from various things, the hypothalamus, the sympathetic nervous system, and so on. Local paracrines, lots of things. But we generate a salinity gradient and allows the collecting duct to concentrate urine. So again, what's going to happen here is that the osmotic pressure, water and solutes are going to move, and that's going to create the gradients we need for the relative concentration of the solute. Also involved in electrolyte reabsorption. So we pull electrolytes back in here, sodium, potassium, chloride, bunches of other stuff, phosphate, ion. So now, that was the PCT. Let's look over at the DCT. The DCT has these things called principal cells, which have receptors for various hormones, also involved in salt-water balance. Intercalated cells involved in acid-base balance, so moving some electrolytes. Here's the deal about the DCT. This is the way to keep these two separate in your head, and these are the things I want you to really remember. The PCT is where you do roughly 2/3 of all reabsorption, and remember there it was done mostly by active transporters and by concentration gradients. In the DCT, we move a lot less. Less than 1/3 of all your stuff is regulated here. However, this is where we're under direct control of hormones. The DCT is the part that is hormone controlled. PCT controlled by transporters and gradients. DCT controlled by hormones. That's the way to think about them in your own head. So a lot of those renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system hormones are going to do their work right here in the DCT. And this is really cool physiology, kids. I want you to follow this through. We're going to take a good look at how these things work. We're really now diving into the details of the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system in part. So, aldosterone. Aldosterone, part of the RAAS. A drop in blood pressure, remember, stimulates the release of renin by the juxtaglomerular cells that produce angiotensin II. All right, angiotensin II stimulates the adrenal cortex, and that releases aldosterone. So aldosterone is now in the blood. Aldosterone, by the way, is a steroid hormone. Make a note of that. There are only 6 real steroid hormones in your body, 6 categories at least. This is one of the big 6. So what does it do? Aldosterone, always think of it in your head as the save sodium hormone. It works down here in the tubules to pull sodium back into the blood. Now remember osmotic pressure, kids? What happens when we move solutes? Water follows solutes. So as we pull sodium back into the blood, we pull water back into the blood with it. Therefore, we make less urine. With more water in the blood, remember, that's going to increase stroke volume, which is going to increase mean arterial pressure. So here we go. This is exactly how aldosterone raises your blood pressure. Now here's an important principle to keep track of as well. Remember, we have the sodium-potassium pump, which we've seen bunches of times. It's kind of a general principle anywhere in your body that when you move sodium one direction, you move potassium the other. And in fact, the way that aldosterone is working, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, about midway up that diagram, see a little thing with the arrows going 2 different directions and an ATP in the middle? What is that? You know what that is. That's the sodium-potassium pump. And that's how aldosterone actually works. It works by causing additional pumps to be inserted into the membrane of the tubule. And then those pumps are pumping sodium back in and potassium out. So that's why I think in terms of, we'll see later with hormone disorders and so on, too much aldosterone could cause too much secretion of potassium. You might end up with something called hypokalemia. All right, we're going to be talking about stuff like that. So notice how the kidney is controlling the levels of hormones in your body. It's controlling your electrolytes. That's aldosterone controlling both blood pressure and water and electrolytes. So both. Let's see, that was actually 3. Aldosterone controlling 3 things: blood pressure, water, and electrolytes. Antidiuretic hormone, ADH. So diuresis means peeing. So what does antidiuretic mean? It means it makes you not pee as much. It's the hormone that makes you not pee. Okay? So dehydration will stimulate your hypothalamus. If you don't have enough water in your body, the hypothalamus will stimulate the posterior pituitary. We're going to see this when we do the endocrine system. The anterior and posterior pituitary do slightly different things. In this case, it's the posterior pituitary that's going to secrete ADH in response to dehydration under control from the hypothalamus. What does ADH do? It goes into the tubules and promotes water reabsorption. So therefore, that solves the dehydration problem. But what is it going to do as a side effect? It's going to increase the total volume of fluid, therefore increases stroke volume, therefore increases blood pressure. So here's another hormone that increases blood pressure at the same time that it's saving water. Notice aldosterone increased blood pressure while it was saving salt. ADH increases blood pressure while it's saving water. So they do a similar thing, but they have a different side job. Okay? It's going to decrease urine volume because you're pulling water from the filtrate back into your body. Therefore, you're not producing as much urine. Okay, and see the nice little graphic. Is that cute or what? Don't you just want to kill it by this time? So let's talk about continuing here with the DCT. And remember, who controls the movement of solutes in the DCT? Hormones do. Remember the 11 organ systems of your body? Which 2 control the other 9? Yeah, nervous and endocrine. Here we are with the endocrine system taking control to regulate our acid base and our electrolytes and stuff like that. It's working in the DCT of the kidney. So yeah, this is the urinary system, but it's really the endocrine system who is in control. Endocrine system has jurisdiction over the DCT, and it determines what happens there. There's another peptide we looked at before, atrial natriuretic peptide. Now, natriuretic means like natural, right, man? You know, like natural? No. Natri for natrium, sodium, uretic, urea, urine. So this is the hormone that puts natrium into your urine. It puts sodium into your urine. It's called atrial. We talked about this when we studied the heart. It's in the walls of the atrium. The walls of the atrium, when they sense excess blood pressure, they release ANP. Why? Because now, for the first time, we're looking at a hormone that decreases blood pressure. The last two we looked at, aldosterone and ADH, both raised blood pressure. ANP is going to lower blood pressure. So keep that straight. This is the opposite of the RAAS. So in response to high blood pressure in the heart, the atria secrete atrial natriuretic peptide. You can remember this is ANP for always need to pee, all right? Because what it's going to do here, it has four actions. It's going to dilate the afferent arteriole, which constrict the efferent, so that we increase GFR, all right? So unlike this is the opposite of what the sympathetic nervous system did. Sympathetic nervous system decreased GFR. Now, ANP is going to increase GFR. So what are we going to do? We're going to filter more. Therefore, we're going to make more urine, aren't we? All right. So it's also going to inhibit the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone pathway because they were trying to save water. Remember, that system was trying to save water. So ANP says, no, let's get rid of water. It's going to inhibit ADH as well. It's going to inhibit the reabsorption of sodium chloride. Why? Because as you pull sodium chloride in, water follows solutes, water comes in with it. ANP's job is to get water out. So it's going to stop all the things that normally try to help you keep water in. And what's going to happen when you get water out? What happens to your total water volume in your body? It goes down, therefore stroke volume goes down, therefore you lower your blood pressure. Remember, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system was triggered by a drop in blood pressure, and all the factors involved there raised blood pressure. Now, here's ANP. It's doing exactly the opposite. It's basically lowering blood pressure, lowering blood volume in order to make that happen by increasing urine output. And there you say ANP can also stand for the Afghan National Police, as well as ANP featuring KK Null, Ultrasonic Action. I've never heard it before, but I'm sure it's a wonderful album. Let's talk about still more hormones here in the DCT and in the collecting duct, all right? Parathyroid hormone. We've been talking about this since Bio 201. So remember, what did parathyroid hormone do? Parathyroid hormone stimulated osteoclasts in the bone. And what did they do? They did calcium resorption, which was they basically broke down bone and they put the calcium into the blood. So parathyroid hormone raises blood calcium, and it does that by affecting calcium reabsorption in the DCT. So here again, the DCT is where we're controlling lots of things through the use of hormones. This is where PTH is doing its job. Now, another thing here is it also increases phosphate excretion, so it decreases new bone formation, all right? Again, that's in line. That makes sense with the osteoclast. Same thing. But notice here the same thing I talked about before with sodium and potassium, about how they usually go in opposite directions. The same is true for calcium and phosphate. So get that into your head. Normally, it's a pump that moves calcium one way and phosphate the other. So those often go in opposite directions in your body, okay? Parathyroid hormone also stimulates the kidney to produce calcitriol, remember, vitamin D, which is a steroid hormone. We'll talk more about we've talked a bunch about vitamin D in Bio 201. We'll talk a little bit more about it here coming up. So the collecting duct now, we're past the DCT, is where we're going to concentrate urine. Osmolarity 4 times as concentrated as deep in the medulla. Medullary portion of the collecting duct is more permeable to water than the sodium chloride. Therefore, what we do is we tend to lose water here. We gain water back into our body, and that concentrates the urine. Okay? Which of the following does not raise blood pressure? AT2, ANP, aldosterone, ADH, or renin? Have you been following the hormone cavalcade? Have you been watching them come down the street in the big floats and everything, and people singing and cheering? So which one of these does not raise? All the others do. Yeah, A and P always need to pee, therefore less water, therefore less stroke volume, therefore decreased blood pressure. It all fits together, kids, it really does. And here, oh my God, this is Torrey. This is where my soul lives. You can see the Colorado River there. It was great because this was at night, and there was a full moon that night, but it was very overcast. It had been storming all day. But you couldn't see the moon itself, but the moon really lit the clouds up, so it made like this lighted dome over the whole Grand Canyon. I was out hiking without even a light, basically. It was so awesome. And at one point I turned around and I saw this tree, and it's like, oh yes, sorcery at the Grand Canyon. Okay, kids, see you later.